And good morning from a chilly Rome. This is all new Intersections Crossing Faith, Culture, and Current Events with Bree Dail and Colonel Matt Dooley. Welcome back to my co-host after almost a month of not seeing him. He's been on super secret squirrel assignment and in working in his robotics and his expertise in that area. We'll be talking about that in a few moments. But for those of you who are joining for the first time, I am an internationally accredited journalist, including accreditation to the Holy See as the Rome correspondent for the Epoch Times. And you may also find me on a Catholic World Report. I've contributed to National Catholic Register and other outlets. I just got a text from my producer asking me, what is a secret squirrel assignment, Matt? We'll talk about that, like a little, joke that we have in the military. And I also hold a BA from Christendom College and a master's degree in foreign policy and diplomacy from the prestigious Norwich University. And so our show is broken down into three themes, and it's news impacting the faith, connecting to news impacting culture, and news impacting current events and politics. And so we got a lot of news that's breaking today and has broken in the past week. But first, Matt, welcome back. And what is a super secret squirrel assignment?
That is a sort of slang tradition in the military. Secret squirrel is the idea that there's all kinds of interesting little nuggets of information hidden in back rooms that you have to have classified clearance to get access to. So something super secret squirrel is something that's on the very high side. It's not just classified or secret or top secret or special compartmentalized information. It's on a higher order, and it's something that people throw around to joke about. How did you get that information? And it's super secret squirrel. They make little patches making fun of it.
So I love them.
In the context of what you mentioned, a lot of what my last month has been about going to conferences that are specific to robotics and autonomous systems, which is the latest, hottest capability, both for commercial and government purposes. We talk about what we're trying to do with robotics is to get human beings out of the dull, dirty, dangerous, and mundane, and leave humans to do what they do best and machines to do what they do best. The future.
And we are going to talk about that. We are going to talk about that today because there was a big conference here in the Vatican over the weekend, specifically talking about that human-centered design. And Matt, we'll talk a little bit more about what you do specifically with that because we both hold multiple jobs. I'm not just a journalist, but because we're so jam-packed today, if we don't get to that, we promise that we will try to do some kind of show where we talk about the newest and coolest things that we're seeing coming down the line in what we can talk about. Obviously maybe not in the military side, but there's a lot of cool tech that's coming out in the secular world with like Elon Musk and others who are really involved in the tip of the spear for growth in technology. But first, church news because it's breaking. So, out of the Vatican this morning, Jeffrey Sachs was appointed to the Academy of Social Sciences by Pope Francis. This is very, very concerning to many, many people because Jeffrey Sachs is a socio-economic advisor, and he has been so for Pope Francis for a while. But now this is an ordinary position at the Academy for Social Sciences. And the big thing is that if you Google Jeffrey Sachs, you will see that he has been advisor to the UN and other very secular organizations supporting population control as a way to eradicate poverty. And he's been doing this forever. But if you start to see reports out of the last few years, population control, I mean, it's a far gone story. We are on a decline and a serious decline in population. So for the Pope to appoint this man as an advisor and an economic advisor to a pontifical academy, this is making waves, and not just in the Catholic world. This is making waves in the secular press today. So be prepared to have to engage people on the fact that what a Pope individually does in a political sense for the state of the pontificate does not mean that is Catholic teaching or supported by Catholic teaching, that we have 2,000 years of history and tradition that supports the Catholic teaching on social justice issues like poverty, and also when it comes to the sanctity of life from conception to natural death. So more to talk about that as it develops. I am going to intend to try to reach out to Jeffrey Sachs, but it tends to happen, especially with those on the left and those who are activists, such as Jeffrey Sachs, that they just don't want to talk to Epoch Times and others. But I am going to try, because I think he should have the chance to be able to make himself known and really talk to this. Also, concerted effort by badly informed, I should say, conservatives on a conference over the weekend has led to a lot of disinformation. And some of these people were on social media pushing things out for about a month on this conference that was focused on a book entitled A Transhuman Code. And I highly recommend people go into it, especially if you're driving to work today and you're in the IT world, because the CEO of WiseKey, which is a cybersecurity firm, was the keynote speaker, and he is the co-author to this book. And he is highly against transhumanism, which is a movement, a philosophical movement. So I'm going to ask, because of the disinformation and the constant disinformation coming out, I'm asking our producer to go ahead and play a video of him answering to some of the disinformation that I took on Sunday after we saw a backlash.
So hi, my name is Carlos Moreira. I am the CEO of WiseKey, a Swiss cybersecurity company based in Geneva. We are discussing today the differences between transhumanism and transhuman code, which is a book I co-wrote with David Ferguson 2 years ago that has become a bestseller in several countries. And the focus on transhuman was to position the human into the transformation that is happening in the fourth industrial revolution. Whether we like it or not, the fourth industrial revolution is coming. This is a revolution that implies that humans need to be protected. And what we discuss in the book is how humans can be protected in different areas of their activity, protected on their health, protected on their lives, protected on their societies, on their cities, on their education, as artificial intelligence, again, whether we like or not, is coming. And the problem is not the human itself, but it's the consequences of AI to convert the human in something we don't want to be. So that's the focus of the book. It's not about transhumanism. Actually, we are against transhumanism, and this is actually one of the reasons we wrote the book, to fight the derivations towards transhumanism. Leave it as human as possible, and human at the center of gravity. Center of gravity means that the human is on control. Whatever evolution technology will have, which will be endless because we are in an exponential growth on technology, human will always have the final switch. We can switch off. And that's what we call code. Code is the switch that allows us to shut down everything that we don't like for us in the future.
Okay, and so I hope people can understand. He does have a thick accent, but I highly recommend you read the book if you are into IT, you are concerned about some of the things that are happening in the world when it comes to robotics, AI, artificial intelligence. And in the interview that I did with him, you can find it on Twitter and also on my Facebook page, he goes on further to talk about why he brought the Vatican in. And this is a really important topic for theologians and ethicists to weigh in on, because tech guys aren't the experts. They're not the experts on morality. If they were, they would have created human-centered design for the World Wide Web. And that's one of the things that he said. When you take a look at the World Wide Web, it isn't based off of human-centered design. The focus on the World Wide Web originally was for the engagement of information to information with the military behind the scenes. So it was information, it was searching, but it was computer focus, computer and information focus. So, Matt, I'd love you to weigh in on this, and we may have to go over to our next break to just talk about this more, because it's such an important thing. And people just don't understand the differences between transhumanism, which like Facebook is really pushing right now. And to the point that they're even they've already taken over Meta.com. They are talking about moving their name from Facebook to Meta, which is talking about the metaverse, which is like a subsistence or like a transcendental way of living. People are literally living alternative lives on the metaverse or in like cyberspace, creating their own avatars, doing business. And I think this also has to deal with a lot of identity crisis. So it's a lot to unpack, but Matt, go ahead and try to do so. And if we have to take it over to break, please do so as well.
To describe the universe, be brief and succinct. So
Yeah.
a couple of things
Right.
there. I'll start with this idea of metaverse. It's not that far removed from, again, I'm going to date myself here, but if you go back to the 80s and the concerns about kids getting wrapped into Dungeons and Dragons, the idea
Right.
of an alternative world where you've got a character, you've got investment in developing that character and their possessions, and it's all imaginary, as this metaverse is. It exists only in the electronic domain as a part of a system that, has been created to create an alternative, a digital earth with property and things you can buy and exchange, et cetera, et cetera. And that's okay if it's a game and a hobby. If it becomes that which governs all of your investment and all of your time, that's a problem.
And that's what's
If there's
happening, Matt. I mean,
Yeah.
people are like, because of the technology that is at lightning speed right now, we are seeing things that you can place. So you have, of course, those goggles that are there that can make you
Yeah.
see the metaverse. It's become
Right.
super highly like engaging, so you can create whatever you want. So again, like we've been having these issues with pronouns and all of that, and I think that there is a connection there, Matt, where like you could say I'm a cat and you have your little like avatar where you've got this talking cat, and you could like literally, but they even have these bodysuits now where you can actually feel things supposedly in the metaverse, and you can know where that goes as well.
It goes to human weakness and human vulnerabilities
Right.
and addictive personalities, et cetera, et cetera.
Yes.
But the reality is that you exist in this world, this physical world. You have to eat. You have to work. You have to do things to generate income so that you can pay for a place to live. Even if your metaverse booth sits inside of a house, it physically sits somewhere. And so your
Right.
reality, the actual physical domain we live in, still governs everything. That is the reality. There's no escape from it.
So Matt,
So that's a problem.
crossing that and looking at what Facebook does, which Facebook is really promoting this philosophy of transhumanism, which in its essence says we are looking to enhance people through, like, we're talking, this is where we get into the whole implants and, Borg type looking, and like that, we're going to enhance a human capabilities through AI and, artificial intelligence, combine that with humans. So, and Moreira said in his talk at this event that you're no longer human when you do that. You have now created yourself to be a merge of something other. And his argument is this transhumanism movement, which this is a reality that's coming. This is what people are, especially in China, people are living in these metaverses because they live under a dictatorship. So the dictatorship now is really trying to get a hold of this metaverse as well. We're at this, like I said, lightning speed. Matt, we're coming to a hard break, but when we return, we're going to continue to talk about this because, why the Vatican? Why did the Vatican get involved with this? And we'll talk a little bit more about the dangers and why it's important to make sure that disinformation does not get out. Inform yourself. When we return, this is Intersections.
The Immaculate Conception is a Catholic dogma that many Protestants have a hard time accepting. They claim it shouldn't be believed because it's not found in the Bible. But I beg to differ. Recall how after the fall in Genesis 3:15, God promised to set enmity between the woman and Satan, between the woman's seed, the Messiah, and Satan's seed. This separation from Satan means the woman's not tainted by sin in any way. Moreover, woman seems to be a title for Eve in her pre-fall state, as is the case in Genesis 2:23. She isn't called Eve until after the fall in Genesis 3:20. So who's this new woman? It's the mother of the Messiah, Mary. So just like the first woman was created without original sin, so too the new woman, Mary, was created without original sin. That's to say, immaculately conceived. I'm Carlo Broussard with the ready reason for Catholic Answers, Catholic.com.
We all know children have a natural innocence and a sense of wonder. Yet our world is full of distractions that can pull families in the wrong direction. But with the help of God and a church family, your children can grow in the security of faith, hope, and love. Weekly Mass provides that critical faith foundation needed in life. So if your family hasn't been to Mass in a while, we'd like to invite you home. Discover more at CatholicsComeHome.org.
And welcome back to Intersections, Crossing Faith and Culture and Current Events. This is Bree Dail, joined by my co-host, Colonel Matt Dooley. And in the first segment, we were talking about news out of the church, and especially this conference that I was privileged to attend on Saturday, which was a focus on a book and a compendium book that is going to be coming out, but in a different way, a technological way. But this book is called The Transhuman Code. And Carlos Moreira, who is the CEO of WiseKey, a cybersecurity company, his intent in this is to ensure, Matt, that human beings, the individual, has full rights over their digital identity. And they do that to ensure that each individual has the ability at any time to turn off access to their digital identity, that's your information that you put online. Every time you make a profile online and you put your digital identity out, that company owns that identity. Facebook owns your identity right now. And his intent is to try to get that turned over so that you have full access and full privilege over that identity. And Matt, Catherine McLean, who's listening to us right now, she asked who would have control of the switch for cybersecurity reasons, the individual that say, and Catherine, if you can watch the video, if you go onto Twitter or you go onto my Facebook page, you'll hear him say this directly. The intent for at least this group, and it's a large growing group of cybersecurity, technical experts, business owners, are people. The people have that. But right now, what the tendency is, and this is something that we have seen with the World Economic Forum, Facebook, and others, that they own it, whether it is the company or the government. And this is a really exciting time, but it's a really dangerous time because, whether it's like you driving in your car, imagine, because this is coming up, and Matt, you can talk to this. It's already happening. But you're driving in your car. This was actually an example that was given by the former CEO of Apple who was there. And I can't remember his name. My apologies for that. But he said, if you were sitting in this, these cars now that are driving themselves, it would be like artificial intelligence now is getting to the point where you're driving down the road and the car knows through the computer, the system that's running, that you're going to, you're heading towards potentially your favorite restaurant. And then and it's lunchtime because the AI already knows that. So it recommends to you, hey, we're heading towards this way. Would you like me to book an appointment at your favorite restaurant? Right? Are you hungry? It's lunchtime, something like that. Instead of saying already, I'm booking that appointment, I'm going to do this for you. It gives you the chance to be able to shut that switch down. The CCP right now is using this type of data to track people. Hey, by the way, you haven't logged into the app that's there to brainwash you on President Xi and patriotism, so you're losing your social credit. And that's what the CCP is doing. So we are at that point right now. We are there. And it's important to know that the Vatican has brought on experts, and including priests, moral theologians, philosophers, who are informing on the morality of a lot of these issues. Matt, you're an expert in this. I look forward to introducing you to many of these individuals from the conference, because I think you have a voice on both the Catholic side as well as an expert in the DoD world. What are your thoughts? I'm sorry, I have a fly. People see me.
I have a lot of thoughts on this. Some professional, some intensely personal. But I'll start by framing some of the problem. We talk about a couple of terms I think the audience should be familiar with: human on the loop, human in the loop, and human off the loop. And what we're talking about is where the human is in the machine's decision-making cycle. If you're in the loop, whatever the sequence of decision, feedback, sensor input, ultimate decision, it has to go through you before it can complete the action. Human on the loop is the system works automatically, but you retain control to shut it off at any time. And that distinction, that subtlety is important, because human on the loop permits efficiencies and rapid action, but leaves a human accountable and in control to be able to flip that switch, push that button and shut it all down. Human off loop means that the human's not involved at all. And that's dangerous when you talk about some of the things that Hollywood, hyperventilates about Terminator and things like that. That's not what anyone wants to create, for a lot of obvious logical reasons. When we talk about managing your data on Facebook, the algorithms that run all of that, when we talk about you being the product and Facebook marketing you and taking your information, a lot of folks have a problem with it because it is human off the loop. You're not involved in where your information goes once you put it there. And so there's no real control. And we talk about reasserting our control over our data rights. It's putting you back on the loop so you can control it and determine what is allowed to be shared and what isn't, and whether you get reimbursed for that information.
That's a big point. That's a big point. That was actually a big point of the CEO of WiseKey, is that he said, look, we're the ones who are producing the ability for people to take back the ownership of their digital ID. So he does have he has a personal choice in doing this, and make no mistake, he is promoting this because he has found a solution for that, but that's not a bad thing in reality.
We've seen a lot of the problems that have come out of it. Facebook is notorious for violating your privacy rights, and we've got to get our hands around it. They make 98% of their, I think it's 98.9% of their generated revenue is coming from these personalized ads, right? And people are just buying things, but they are taking your information. Now imagine if you owned the rights to your digital ID, you would have to be reimbursed by Facebook as part of this. That would be legally. And what's really exciting is the fact that because this expert and CEO in the high-tech industry has connections with all of these other movers and shakers, because he hasn't beaten them over the head with his faith, because his faith is informing his work, but he's not, out there being a missionary. Because he hasn't done that, he has stood on the ground of expertise, and people respect him for that. He has real clout at the UN, and he is pushing, and this is brilliant, he's pushing a focus on your digital ID being part of your human right. And that is huge. If you imagine that the UN come out and say it is part of your human rights to own and control your ID, your digital ID. Matt, what do you think what would come from something like that? I think the first thing is that we would reassert protections that we enjoyed before the advent of Facebook, before the advent of a digital profile. It would enable us to reassert our control over our reputation and our right to be forgotten if we want to just unplug and not be someone used for our database. But it also sets the important tone for where we reinsert morality into this digital economy. It's important where we reinsert our morality and our sense of civilized decorum as we move into the AI era and the autonomous robotics arena. It's important to have this structure in place. We split the atom and then spent 70 years chasing the consequences. The fact that we're having this conversation now before we allow AI to rule our economies and to govern and transport us back and forth, I think it's an important conversation. The problem is not the machines. The problem is us, human beings. Garbage in, garbage out. Just as you can improperly raise a child and turn a person into a sociopath, there's a way to prevent that from happening. It's the same way in raising AI. There's an important necessity in establishing a moral rubric before you turn the switch on. You and I Matt, are the product.
Let me jump on this because we could talk about this for like the entire show, and I think we should, and eventually I think we should come back to this. And I am interviewing exclusively all of the panel at this place, so at the conference. So we'll come back to this and really maybe dedicate an entire show on this because it's so important. We are in an exciting time. This is not doomsday, and I think people really have to see that. Like, it's really important to do like 2 seconds worth of research and not listen to pundits, because imagine if this man is defeated he has practical solutions to this this fight, and he's well respected. If he's defeated by people who are pushing out disinformation to the point where he just walks away, or he shuts down the conversation for Catholics because, he's like, look, they're not adding to anything. They're causing a lot of the disinformation. That is happening. So I highly recommend people get the full understanding, ask the questions. He is there. He's on social media, and he is answering questions right now. I highly recommend people who are journalists or people who have been talking about him to just pause and maybe reach out to him and ask him hard questions, because he's not afraid of that. We have to move on, though. Matt, Biden is coming this week to Rome, and he is reportedly scheduled to meet Pope Francis. But unfortunately, right now, none of the press has any opportunity to cover this event because there's an ongoing blackout for world leader visits by the Vatican right now, despite COVID regulations having been lifted. Originally, they had, had stopped press from covering the internal communications and the photo ops and whatnot with the Pope and with world leaders, and that has ceased since COVID, and the press have requested multiple times for it to be reinstated, and it hasn't. So I'm using some of my contacts in Washington D.C. to see if I can get into the pool, but be prepared, because the potential of Biden going to Mass and receiving communion, upping the back and forth within the USCCB is very high, and it would not be surprising to me that would be something that just makes a political catastrophe in the United States right now. Moving forward, though, because we only have 6 minutes, it's always super exciting to talk with Matt. There's a Green Pass protest right now, and it's continuing in Italy, despite the New York Times and other mainstream media blacking out this. And so I've asked our producer to just show some of the videos of the ongoing protests and tweets that have gone out. So we're going to just show that really quickly. It's just going to be a quick so that you can see the numbers of people that are there. So what we're seeing here are just thousands of people protesting against the Green Pass. And what is the Green Pass? The Green Pass, Matt, is what the Italian government has applied to everyone across the board, showing either that they've been tested within the last 48 hours for COVID or who have received their inoculations. And this Green Pass now is required for people to work. So even people who've been inoculated are saying enough. The government has no right to stop us from working in the private sector, but they're continuing to do so. And we are seeing this this lack of ability and people are losing their jobs. We're also seeing this news coming out. Mandatory vaccines in the UK may cause mass exodus from the NHS. This has come out today. So we're seeing now hundreds of thousands of people who've been working this COVID problem in the national health system in the UK potentially going to lose their jobs because of the mandates that are out there. Okay, so this is an ongoing issue. And what do we see out of the news this week? Dr. Fauci has now done the circuit twice in the last week. Number one was that news coming out saying that the NIH, which he oversaw, Institute for Health, confirmed that, which has been reported for years, including by my colleague Emerald Robinson, which is the NIH oversaw investment into the Wuhan lab on gain of function research. So there we have it. They have now confirmed it, that they were involved with that. He's tried to make the rounds and say, well, it's not completely true. It's been evident for 2 years. And on top of that, we hear the story, which is horrific, about puppy abuse and unnecessary testing on animals, which just then adds to this element of, testing on human beings and testing on animals. Can we just stop? I had a question for scientists I still haven't gotten an answer for. We're in the 21st century. There's got to be another way of doing these things. This is horrific, and Fauci oversaw this as well. So now we have this video that Fauci put out, and I'm going to ask Adrian. I don't know how much time we have left, but we can hit the other side as well. But we have this video of Fauci supporting vaccines for children. Take a look. And I think he's trying to pull it up. But as he's doing that, Dr. Fauci has now said children from 5 to 11 will be able to receive the vaccine starting in November.
And the recommendation from the CDC, it's entirely possible, if not very likely, that vaccines will be available for children from 5 to 11 within the first week or two of November. So
what we're seeing here is now, despite all of the research that we've been seeing, all of the effects coming out of highly vaccinated populations like Israel, the push to get children vaccinated continues. And this is the same man who has been lying about really important things like, the U.S. funding gain of function research in Wuhan, and also has been overseeing horrific experiments. Matt, when will this stop? Uh-oh. I don't hear you, Matt. There we go. Uh-oh. There we go.
You still got me? Yeah,
yes,
I don't think it's going to stop until we are able to politically hold people like that accountable. Unfortunately, we probably have to wait until the 2022 election before that's even possible. I firmly believe that Dr. Fauci needs to be investigated and if found criminally negligent, held accountable. But even if he's not criminally negligent, he's definitely been involved in enough of this demonstrably to remove his microphone and his sense of authority in any of this. I continually call into question some of the things he says that are not settled science at all. And I wonder at what point do we pull the plug on his mic? The embarrassment of being involved in funding the Wuhan gain of function research that's now been proven. We've moved from tinfoil hat conspiracy, if you mentioned it, to, hey, maybe that's possible, to now this definitely happened. And then on top of that, you see the research that was done on sandflies and beagles. I wonder if Dr. Mengele won't find himself in jail sometime after 2022. Unfortunately, there are other doctors we should be listening to, and this guy isn't one of them. And that's my my degree of frustration here, is that he doesn't need to be in front of the microphone. We do need to listen to scientists, just not him.
Right. And it irks me because, and I am writing this article exclusively for Newsmax this week, and like I said, will be published in the magazine in December. But the focus is the full timeline of mandates that have come out from COVID. This has been administration, both from the Trump side as well as from the Biden side, And we still have information ongoing about the development of this particular virus, but yet we see legislation going down that is affecting not just health, but in fact affecting the job market and affecting the economy. And when people say, "Oh, we're surprised about the supply chain issue," Matt, look, this is just the very tippy top, and this has been something that people have been talking about since the quarantine. Is how is this going to affect the markets if we're going to keep everybody at home for an extended amount of time, right? And it's reasonable to say, well, this is going to stop production from the beginning, and it's not just in the United States; it's all out throughout the world. I mean, and the reliance on China, and we saw this within the United States. But what's really scary to me, Matt, is that I spoke with a leading economist and business owner for this particular article that I'm writing, who said, right now what we're seeing is pre-inflation numbers. We saw the housing market go super sky high because housing was limited in its availability. And so with that comes what? Demand goes sky high, and the prices go sky high. They inflate. Now we're starting to see, he said, that is the first start to the indication for inflation. And he said, what he is seeing is a trend that is very similar to what we saw in the 1980s under Carter and the 70s and 80s. Leading up to the real elements of inflation, extremely high gas prices. We're talking not just for your car, but also for oil heating your house. And we're starting to see, we're going towards Christmas. We're starting to see cold season approaching. And that's when people are going to get their bills. And with that, and combine that with high cost for food, we are going to see inflation. And he said, we are going to see a recession. What are your thoughts as we head towards the end of this segment on that?
I think it goes to a larger question. Who's in charge? I don't see anyone in charge. And if they are, they don't understand basic economics. They don't understand the complexities of this economy and the things that you do to it, to the job market, and overregulation, and on day one, shutting down energy independence to the world's economic engine, which is the United States of America. I see a situation where people don't understand the second and third and fourth order effects, and attempting to completely, fundamentally transform America. They're going to get that, but it's not going to be what they think. And unfortunately, we're all going to suffer.
Yeah. So, I mean, this is not end of times, doom and gloom, but we need to start tightening our belts now and really focusing on what it means to do so as we come towards Christmas. The access to things may not be the issue, because we do have a really robust way of being able to adapt and overcome in the United States. Italy is not as strong on that. But supply chain is there. We are getting ships coming in. So, yes, we may be seeing some run on groceries. But the real concern, and this is what he said, was the energy side of things. We are going to see this start to take effect. And it doesn't help to have an administration who's shut down the gas pipelines, who's really pushing fossil fuel and fracking limitations. And now, instead of really dealing with this coming crisis, economic, slowdown, we are seeing a new national strategy on gender equality. Matt, take us to break talking about this, because I missed this completely. But out of the White House, a statement was released showing a fact sheet on national strategy and on gender equality and equity.
Yeah, I have personally read every national security strategy that's been published through 3 administrations. But this is the first time I've seen a national strategy on gender equity and equality. Think about all the concerns, whether it's COVID or managing and containing a resurgent China, or working a policy that somehow gives Vladimir Putin a moment of pause, or figuring out how to reestablish American energy independence, all of those things that would be, I would think, far more important to a new administration coming in to replace the Trump administration. This comes out. This is where their focus is. And it codifies, if you read it, and again, we've now moved from something that was, could be considered conspiratorial, tinfoil hat kind of thing, to a codification in a formal federal government national strategy that describes this concept called intersectionality, which we can talk a bit more of after the break about what that is. But in summary, it's this idea that all of these different minority definitions and specific small interest group definitions all combine to intersect and force folks here into one of two categories: the oppressor versus the oppressed. And depending on how many different rank order boxes you can check, you are higher in that pecking order or lower in that pecking order, and thus less legitimate in your concerns. And we can walk through some of this that the document specifically calls out, but it codifies this concept of social Marxism in an official document. We're no longer in a university classroom in the 1960s. We're now into formal policy, and it's concerning.
Coming up to this break, it is really important to realize that, yes, we have this governing document that's talking about gender equity and equality, but we have fluid genders nowadays and lots of definitions of those. And we have seen the results of those within real policy being enacted, and then, children having to bear a lot of the brunt of this. Matt, if there is a transgender woman who is wrestling or doing, kickboxing or mixed martial arts against women and beating them up, and this is what equity is and equality, I really have a hard time seeing how those who are in the original movements for women to really see this as a benefit to society. Any last words before we go to break?
Yeah, in the end, we're conflating the difference between equality, equal opportunity, and equity, and that's what this document does in such an insidious fashion. I'll talk more about it after the break to give your listeners some specifics about what this document says.
This is Intersections, crossing faith, culture, and current events. We'll be back after break.
Protestants believe the Bible is the only source for determining Christian truth, a doctrine called sola scriptura, which is Latin for scripture alone. Is this true? The answer is no, and here's the reason. It's self-refuting. Since knowledge of which books constitute scripture is a Christian truth, sola scriptura demands that the Bible tell us what scripture is. But guess what? It doesn't. The Bible never tells us which books God has inspired. So if sola scriptura were true, well then we'd have to deny our knowledge of what Scripture is. But that's self-refuting, my friends. The only way to have such knowledge is if Christ established an infallible church to tell us so. But Protestants reject this idea, leaving us with an infallible effect, knowledge of what Scripture is, produced by a fallible cause, the church, which is absurd. Sola Scriptura is definitely not a doctrine that's compatible with reason. I'm Carlo Broussard with the ready reason for Catholic Answers, Catholic.com.
Years ago, when I started acting, modeling, and singing in Mexico, my Catholic faith was not the center of my life. It took me many years to discover that success, fame, money, and all the pleasures of the world were not going to fulfill me. I got to a point in my life where I thought I had everything, but I realized something was missing. Thankfully, I began a faith journey that brought me back to God and home to the Catholic Church. You can too.
Discover more at CatholicsComeHome.com.
And good morning. This is the last segment of Intersections, Crossing Faith, Culture, and Current Events. Oh my goodness, Matt, we have had a jam-packed show. For those of you who are just joining us, I'm with my co-host, the ever-intrepid Lieutenant Colonel Matt Dooley. And you know, here's the thing, and we were talking about this White House strategy for equity, and, you know, this is going to segue, I think, into culture, you know, in this last segment, because we do have a culture story, and then I have a surprise video for Matt, which I think will really motivate everyone, including Matt, today, as it is a special feast day. But first, Matt, you had a thought on this, you wanted to finish your thoughts on this particular strategy, national security strategy, so to speak, on gender equity and equality.
Yeah, the thing is, as you read the document, and I zoomed in on a couple of different things that stuck out with me, is that they put equity in front of equality. And that is indicative of, I think, their approach to the problem. And the frustration I think a lot of folks have with this is what began years ago with a general principle that we could all agree upon, which is just be nice to people. And we talk about equality, creating equal opportunities. Because really personal agency, you know, the finding that you can take charge of your life is far more effective than waiting on government to fix it yourself. But we all got to be generally nice to each other. That's something we can all agree upon. But this idea of equity, that there are certain underserved communities that are defined specifically by, you know, women, girls first, and then Black, Latino, Indigenous or Native American persons, Asian Americans, Native Hawaiians, Pacific Islanders, other people of color, and then religious minorities, lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, queer, intersex, and whatever, persons with disabilities, persons who live in rural areas, persons who are otherwise broadly adversely affected by persistent poverty or an outcome inequality or whatever you can come up with. Note that nowhere in there does it mention a white Anglo-Saxon Protestant male who happens to be at the very, very lowest rung here. And the idea that you can somehow use the government to establish equity, which is not equal opportunity, but assurance of equal outcome. And that is not philosophically, economically, realistically possible without discriminating against other people solely based on their opposite category, based on all those things I read to you. And that's disturbing.
Yeah.
In the end, the 6 inches between
like
your
the application. Sorry, yeah. Go ahead, Matt.
It gets away from the fact that the 6 inches in between your ears are far more determinant about where you go and what you achieve in life than the space between your knees, to put it lightly. In the end, we've got to focus more on where we're working towards in personal agency rather than where we're from. Or our socioeconomic status from where we begin. This society, the United States of America in particular, is far more broadly open to opportunity regardless of whoever you are. And to sit back and create a national strategy that says something the opposite of that is just untrue, as well as irresponsible. And I'll close with this, and I'm going to quote a gentleman by the name of Jeff Tucker. If you believe the progress, that progress consists of a mathematical definition of perfect equality, perfect equity, and that the reason we're not there yet is due to one group winning at the expense of another, and therefore the path forward is forged by disparaging or harming other people and climbing over their reputations and their bodies to realize your own dreams, then you set up a framework of a war of all against all. I could think of nothing more irresponsible than this strategy, because it absolves people of their own personal agency and puts the government in charge of something they can never control.
This is a direct definition of critical theory. And for those of you who are listening, go ahead and read the Frankfurt School. Take a look at what critical theory is. Now it's being applied through critical race theory. And really what you just quoted definitely sounds like fascism to me. It definitely sounds like what the Nazis did. There was a group of people who were causing everybody else to be victimized. And so we need to make sure that large group, that institution is, repressed in order for all of us to have equality and equity. It's a real concerning movement. But Matt, we are on to some culture news. And then I definitely want our producer to play a video for us to close, just so that everybody's super motivated this St. Crispian's Day. But what's up with the story on Alec Baldwin shooting 2 people and killing 1 on set? I mean, do we not really train how to handle weapons? And how is it possible that someone could shoot someone else and then actually shoot 2 people with, blanks? It looks like now the report is that there was one live, bullet, live ammo in this weapon, and it looks like there's some stories coming out of this that's not good for Alec Baldwin. Any thoughts? And then we'll go real quick to that video of ours.
Yeah, the first 2 rules of firearm safety is you always presume that every firearm is loaded, even one handed to you and said to be safe. And number 2, you never point the weapon at anything you don't intend to shoot. There were supposed to be safety checks in place on the set of any Hollywood film where firearms were used, and some of those things were, you expect, if there are going to be loaded firearms, they're only loaded with blanks. And they've been proven safe by prop handlers who were there specifically to handle those weapons and to ensure that either they're empty or that the rounds that are loaded in don't have an actual bullet in the casing. This was an Old West movie, set in that era. So we've got revolvers involved here, so that
it's
increases
really
the
easy
danger
just
of
to
an actual
open
round
them
being
up.
loaded in.
But it's really easy just to open them up and check. I mean, when you're handed a weapon, and a weapon that is an authentic weapon, this is not some plastic gun. This is an authentic weapon. If you're going to handle a weapon, you handle it with the knowledge that this is a thing. Its sole purpose is to kill. So you have to respect that thing and know that you are taking full responsibility. Matt, last thought on this?
Yeah, that somehow a live round got inserted into the weapon. And candidly, there's no purpose for a live 45 caliber long casing bullet to be in a revolver unless you're going to shoot a target. So someone handed Mr. Baldwin a revolver, a Colt with a 45 round in it. And he was going through rehearsal and describing to the director what he was going to do, and pulled the gun out, cocked it, and shot it. And it unfortunately, tragically, killed one of the cinematography folks on the ground there and wounded the director. So, we've got a situation where the investigation is ongoing, but clearly there are a number of questions that have to be answered. One, who is this prop company? Who was the person who was the last person to put the weapon on the cart? Why wasn't it checked? And how in the hell did we get a live round on set anywhere near those weapons?
Right. So, Matt, I have a little surprise for you for today's feast day. Today's the feast of St. Crispian. And so the best speech ever created ever. Here you go for our audience.
We few, we happy few, we band of brothers, for he today that sheds his blood with me shall be my brother. Be he ne'er so vile, this day shall gentle his condition.
And gentlemen in England, now abed, shall think themselves accursed they were not here, and hold their manhood's chief, whiles any speaks that fought with us upon St. Crispin's Day!
We few.
Oh my goodness! I wish we could watch the entire that movie in and of itself is just a masterpiece. But I took that particular part of the speech, the St. Crispian Day's speech, and this was from Henry V. Please take the chance today and watch that movie if you can, just because it's just a fascinating movie, and I think it's one of Shakespeare's best. But Matt, We few, we happy few, we band of brothers. I know that that's the title of an amazing book on the Army and World War II. As we close, we have 2 minutes. Can you tell me why this particular speech? It's just so motivating for all of us who were in the military. It just makes you just want to go with him. Tell me a little bit about this last 2 minutes.
Yeah, Stephen Ambrose's book, Band of Brothers, is about Easy Company 506 Parachute Infantry Regiment, 101st Airborne, World War II. And their story was made into a 10-part series on HBO. But that's where the term Band of Brothers comes from. And you could put parentheses sisters. We serve together, we fight together. And
Right.
what he's talking about in the face of fearful odds, come what may, being there, being present, being part of something larger than yourself, in defending, home and hearth, the ashes of our fathers and the temples of our gods, being able to step forward and doing that as a part of a crew is something that I think unifies a lot of folks who served in the military. That you don't fight necessarily for the flag or whatever, you fight for each other. And that's what he's getting after, is that come what may after this, those who were not here will look with disregard of their own reputations because they weren't. And so no matter what, if you served in the military, you were part of this, and you'll never ever have to explain yourself or justify yourself to anybody else again, because we happy few were together.
Yeah, and I love it, to hold their manhood cheap for not having done this. And I just have to say, really glad to have my friend and my co-host, Matt Julie, back on. That's it for this week, folks. Please join us next Monday for Intersections. And we wish you a very blessed St. Crispian's Day from Matt and I. God bless you. Take care.